district cooling is a topic that's very close to our heart at DevCo. So we are very happy that the South Initiative is picking that up. We have some very brilliant speakers with us today. First of all, we're going to hear from the IEA, from Gerard and Mastro. They will talk on their work on cooling in general, how the demand for cooling globally is growing, and also how they see district cooling fitting into that picture. After that, I will give a little introduction to district cooling in Europe, what's happening on the markets, what are the drivers, and so on. And then we'll turn to some very specific examples of implementation of district cooling. That's, of course, very important, and show us some good practice and best cases for how it's done. And first of all, we'll go to Vienna and hear from Aleksandar Ivancic on how they have developed district cooling in Vienna, along with the large district heating system that's in operation down there. That's going to be extremely interesting. And then lastly, we'll hear from Aleksandar Ivancic, that has been a major part of the development of district cooling in Barcelona. So very much looking forward to this session. And then without further ado, again, I'll leave the word to Gerard and Mastro from the IEA to talk to us. The floor is yours, Gerard.
Thank you very much for this introduction. Let me just share my screen. Okay. And thanks to the organizers for having me here. Just checking if you're seeing my screen correctly now.
Yes.
Okay, great. As Jacob said, I'm working at the IEA, focusing on sustainable buildings at the Energy Technology Policy Division, and I'm also covering the role of desk officer for the District Heating and Cooling Technology Collaboration Program. And today we will see some of the key trends for space cooling, and at the end of the presentation, some of the opportunities we see for district cooling. The IEA is working extensively on buildings and space cooling with projects that looks at the sector indirectly as a part of the broader energy systems, but also looking at the building sector specifically at some of its end uses. For space cooling, we started 3 years ago with the Future of Cooling publication, a global analysis, followed by some more regional roadmaps as the future of cooling in China and the future of cooling in Southeast Asia. We also provide snapshot of the current situation with short-term recommendation, as in the tracking clean energy progress, as we see in the slide, where we can see that we need more efforts for cooling to be aligned with longer-term climate objectives. And in this presentation, we're going to see why. We all have heard that the demand for cooling services is rising rapidly, and that there is still a great disparity among the ownership of air conditioners and the people that needs cooling, in particular among the people that lives in very hot and humid places. At the same time, we expect that this situation will change quickly due both to rising living standards, but also to heat waves. And we expect already to 2030 to have residential air conditioners to increase by around 2/3 compared to today. We've been looking up to 2070, where we expect that 3/4 of world households could have at least one air conditioners. And if in this picture we include residential units, this means almost quadrupling the number of units that we have today. In the same time horizon, the building floor area is expected to increase by more than 2-fold. So these two factors combined together make space cooling one of the most critical blind spots of our global energy system. Despite some of the positive policy signs that we have seen in recent years, space cooling, it is already the fastest growing energy using buildings. And by taking into account current trends, as we do in our stated policy scenario, we see that energy consumption for space cooling will increase as much as 50% by 2030 and almost triple by 2070. Implications of this are not just on the building sector, but on the energy system as a whole, because space cooling will drive at least 1/5 of the global growth of electricity consumption by 2070. And this will put enormous stress on the power system and especially for meeting peak demands. At the same time, we're also seeing many opportunities with the technologies and the systems we have now to limit the impact of the growth of the stock of air conditioners. In our sustainable development scenarios, which has a trajectory of emissions to reach net zero emissions globally by 2070, we see that space cooling demand can be cut in half, almost in half, by addressing three key priorities on the technology side. The first one is to have better buildings and improved urban planning, so reducing the need for the demand of cooling. The second is to increase the performances of the technologies and the systems, distribution systems progressively. In particular, we need performances of sold equipment to move from 4 today to 7 at least in 2030, and also to the ability to fulfill different loads and variability. So the third point is to integrate more flexible and responsive solutions, which are able to increase the whole energy system efficiency. We had a look in terms of emission, what this means, and this means saving cumulatively 27 gigatons of CO2 emissions by space cooling technologies alone from 2020 to 2070 in the sustainable development scenarios compared to the stated policy scenarios. And this is equivalent to 27 times what is currently emitted by the space cooling sector today globally. As we said before, we already have in the market very efficient space cooling technologies and systems. But what we see from the figures is that 80% of what is needed is achieved by mature and early adoption technologies. And especially over a longer term, we need to accelerate the deployment of the technologies which are not yet in mass market today, which also includes district cooling, and also thinking of efficient solutions which are able to phase out global warming potential refrigerants, integrating renewable and storage within the cooling systems, improved dehumidifications, and also improved control systems. Another point that we can get from these figures is that, especially on a more longer term, we also need further innovation. For example, looking at demonstration technologies that we have now, for example, including more hybrid solution, the capability to exploit synergies with other end uses, and also more innovation in designs. For example, thinking in compressors. We have mapped all the mentioned technologies and much more into the ETP, Clean Energy Technology Guide. It is an interactive framework which contains information for over 400 technologies or components within the whole energy system. In the slides, we see a picture of the magnitude of the technologies we modeled. And all of these technologies as a role to achieve goal of net zero emissions to 2070. For each of these technologies, we include information on the level of maturity, compilation of development and deployment plans, key players in the field, but also performance improvement targets and key activities in the technology area. Among those, of course, we have district heating, district cooling, that today is still a development segment. In particular, it is estimated that nowadays it supplies less than 5% of the global cooling demand, but also with significant progress in recent years. And we see these technologies as very promising for several reasons. We're going to see some of the most important for us. First, is that where it is suitable to be deployed, so in very dense areas with dense space cooling needs, we see that fits very well the view of a more integrated and responsive energy system, in particular for the ability to integrate several sources of energies like free and natural sources, and also others that otherwise would have been wasted. We see as a source of flexible capacity to fulfill different loads efficiently and reliably. And also we see it as a provider for peak shaving opportunities, so through the network itself, but also through storage that can absorb excess electricity, but also eat from other sectors. In particular, we see district cooling as a system that can host innovative concepts, which can create cross-sectoral synergies, especially with non-space cooling uses. For example, thinking of heat recovery to produce hot water, and also our solutions which are able to increase the overall system efficiency. To this last point, in particular, we see that due to the growing cooling capacity, we can have a sort of even a reverse trend where the cooling market, the heating market can learn from the cooling market in the future, especially if we look at vapor compression technologies. We have seen that innovation in the cooling market can have potential spillovers into the heating market. Let's think, for example, to these new compressors for or also heat recovery, and this will deliver economic benefits on both the heating and cooling markets, and we think that this is very important. As another point, additional point, is that the advantages for district cooling can be more pronounced in the area where heat islands are a significant problem, and where on-site air conditioner is one of the cause for the heat island itself, and also in addition can solve some urban planning problem as space constraints in urban areas or aesthetic. Just to point out to the audience that might be interested to this, the District Heating and Cooling Technology Collaboration Program delivered the guideline for sustainable district cooling, so it can be of interest. To conclude, some of the key action to scale up the opportunities for district cooling that we see is certainly one related to the awareness of the benefits, but to the also awareness of how it operates. So providing more evidence of to the different stakeholders which are involved of the systems which are successful, for example, as is done in these calls. Also including the benefits to society. Another point on awareness is the awareness about the potential, especially because this solution is very locally dependent. We think more work needs to be done to understand the local condition and to support research, to map resource and needs that we have. We think that we need additional R&D to test these innovative concepts as hybrid system, coupling, for example, vapor compression and absorption, chillers, design of new compressors, of improved dehumidification. And on the policy side, we need some policy at both the national and local level to enable the conditions to deploy the district cooling technologies, for example, to be included into national policies as an energy efficiency measures, and also on a more local level to have a legal framework that design market conditions for district cooling. On this point also, since it is associated to very local conditions and also building characteristics, we think there is more work needed to include it in urban planning, to align timing and objectives, for example, through appropriate zonings within the urban municipality plans itself. And at last, we think that we need some new business models to attract finance to the sectors. Thank you very much, and looking forward to questions and the discussion later on.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Chiara. That was very much on time, which is great. And I think that also leaves room for just one question that came in during your presentation. I'll just read it aloud. It's from Nicholas Fry. He's asking, is there a cost-effective place for low temperature resources below 75 centigrade in district cooling? And I assume that he's talking about waste heating to be used through absorbers for district cooling with temperatures below 75 degrees. Is that something that you looked at in your technology reviews?
Yeah, we are certainly considered a broad range of technologies, including absorption cycles at different working conditions. That's certainly one point. But then in our let's say, results, we take into account technologies which are already ready for the markets. So we think that in this case, we will need more evidence and more case studies, as I was saying before, on awareness, to know more about it, for having it cost effectively implemented, but we certainly see it as one of the potential solutions in the mix.
Okay, thank you very much. And if there's any elaborations for that questions, please just type it in. I don't know if everyone has seen the QA function, but it's a very efficient way of asking questions. So if there are any, please put them in there, and then we'll try to pick them up either during the presentations or in the end. Okay, thanks a lot for your presentation, Chiara. Now I will give a short introduction to the markets in Europe and what is driving it. Let me just see if I can do that. Does everyone see my screen now? It's just a fairly boring picture with 6 old white men, but that's where we are at DevCo at the moment. We are a small business management consultancy company. We work with district cooling over the last 20 years to be a consultant and advisor, and also co-developer and operator on a number of large district cooling schemes in Europe and abroad. And I'll just give you a short introduction to what we see in the European market. As Chiara said, the demand for cooling is definitely growing, and is growing quickly. What is then driving the district cooling? Let's see if I can make this work. Yeah, so basically, the market penetration in Europe is very, very low for district cooling. 2 to 3% is what is estimated in the numbers that Euroheat and Power have been collecting in the district cooling group. We see that the main customers are, of course, commercial buildings, large commercial buildings with a large demand for space cooling, but also public buildings and hospitals. And then there are some industry clients connected to some of the systems. The market is very skewed, if you can say like that. There are a few mature countries with a pretty big build out of district cooling, and then there are a lot of developing markets with fewer systems. So just to look at one of the mature markets, Sweden, that actually has about 25 or 30% of the total installed capacity for district cooling in Europe. There is a capacity of more than 900 megawatts and a total length of the network of more than 600 kilometers. And I think this is mostly interesting because we don't really connect Sweden with being very warm. So it's not necessarily that it's the outdoor temperature that at least only drives the development of district cooling. In Sweden, that's been a lot down to switching out refrigerants and having that synergy with the heating market that allowed to develop a district cooling market based on heat pumps. If we look to France, that's sort of the other developed market in Europe. There is an installed capacity of roughly the same size. Of course, it's also a quite hotter market and country to reside in, so therefore the demand for space cooling is naturally bigger. Besides that, in Europe, there's a lot of city developments that are sort of dominating the district cooling markets. Barcelona, that we're going to hear from a little later. We have Berlin, Brescia, Milano. Copenhagen also has a fairly developed system. Lisbon, Munich, Paris, and then Vienna, that's also going to present a little bit later. And Stockholm, that's probably the most mature and developed district cooling system in Europe. So just a little bit about the markets, and then why are we seeing this district cooling development, and what is sort of driving it? What we see right now is that it has a lot to do with the sector integration. And what is that? Well, sector integration is, of course, to utilize the benefits when you couple heating, cooling, and electricity. And as we see that the electricity demand is growing rapidly, so is the electricity production from renewable sources. And with district cooling, it allows you to use the electricity when it's produced cheaply, store it, and then use it with the customer at any given time. Just an example from Denmark, we expect that we have to invest 1.5 billion euros in the capacity of the power networks over the next years to catch up with the development. But if we don't do this sector integration, then that investment will at least double. And we see that district cooling can offer a lot in the sector integration and sort of do the peak shaving that Chiara also mentioned. And therefore we're looking more at flexibility of the system and also the efficiency for the entire system and not just for the cooling system. Another point is the renovation cycles. We see a lot of cities that is trying to drive down the carbon emissions in the city. And we know that the renovation cycles is 20 years plus, also for cooling systems. So by implementing district cooling, the city or utility can have a better feeling of exchanging to efficient technologies and making sure that the cooling supply in the city is more renewable and more efficient. It also helps accelerate the deployment that Chiara was also talking about earlier. If we take it, let's just say one chiller at a time in a city and leave it to the individual building owners, then it will take a lot longer to be efficient and be carbon neutral in that segment. And we don't really have time for that. So what are the learnings from some of the systems that we see? And of course, Vienna and Barcelona will also give their input on that, but just a few key takeaways that we've seen is, of course, to have a master plan for district cooling development, but even more important than having the long-term goal is probably to have phases in it. So looking at what can be done within, let's say, 2 years, and what does that first phase look like, and making sure that that can stand on its own feet, also financially and operationally, so that that can be executed. And also, making sure that we focus on what is possibly locally, talking to the business owners, the building owners, and getting them on board is really crucial. So that's one point. Another one is to focus on what to build. No, honestly, it's the other way around. We see that there's a lot of focus on technology, chillers, absorption chillers, heat pumps, but the key is really to build a business within district cooling so that it gets economically viable, and use the technical solution that allows for that. And then in time, you can always switch your production technology. And most of the projects that we see that don't materialize is because they focus too much on what to build. So instead have more holistic view on how to develop, from an organizational perspective, from a commercial perspective, from a resource perspective, from a financial perspective, make sure that a project is fully developed. The last thing I'm just going to say is that there's a lot of talk about just leaving this to the market, have the market develop district cooling. But if we look at just a typical investor perspective, there is a risk and a expected return. And when that meets the profitability of a project, then there's a chance that the market will pick up a project. So that's just a very typical way of looking at it. If we then couple that with the different phases that we see in a district energy, that could also be heating, but district energy development, we have the uncertainty in the early phases of the development where we develop the business case and the feasibility are extremely high. And therefore, it's very hard to have the market act on projects in the early stages. Another reason is that if we look at how the cost of developing a project is developing, then the early stages are also fairly cheap to develop. And then when you go into the more development of a project with signing contracts, and then the cost of development rises very sharply. And of course, in establishment, there's a lot of, all the capex has to be put in there. So basically just taking away from this that we cannot expect the market to do all the early stage development on these projects, because the profitability of these projects is just lower than the general uncertainty and therefore the risk associated with the early stages. Therefore, there has to be some kind of collaboration between the public sector and the private sector to make these projects appear. Well, I think that was enough from my side. Then we'll go straight to some of the good examples, and then we'll have time for questions in the end. I'll stop sharing, and then I will leave the word to Aleksandar Ivancic from Vienna. Alex, the word is yours.
Hello. Thank you. Hello, heartily welcome from my side. First of all, I would like to underline every word Jacob Bjerregaard said. I think this is also the way we did in Vienna. We looked at it as a business, and we started some years ago, and just took the start, led to the way we are here having now. So I try to share my screen. Okay, is it working? No. So what was our motivation to start with district cooling? It was we thought about it as a product that really fits very well to us. It is a positive political awareness. It completes us as a energy supplier. It adds a new product to what we can offer to our customers, and it has a great fit to us as a company with our existing services and our existing infrastructure. We are also providing district heating, so district cooling is also has a very great fit to us. So this was our starting point, and then we saw also we have waste heat in the summer. We could use in absorption chillers. That was also a kind of trigger which led us to think about district cooling. But I would guess it is the second point, but it was an important point also for us. So we started with two main principles. We really have district cooling with a cooling plant and a district cooling network, but also we implement cooling on site, where we build up with absorption chillers and compression chillers together, and we all combine it as our district cooling concept, because it leads to the same principle, that we provide cooling to our customers, and we make it individual for our customers, and we try all of the concepts with to maximize the efficiency. So a short view about our development now. We have about 12 different sites now where we produce cooling, and it is a mix of district cooling and decentral cooling with on-site. District, for example, in a hospital like SMZ Ost, we have a cooling site, we provide it on-site. And for example, in the Spitalau, we have a plant with district cooling where we provide the district cooling over networks. And there is also a brief some figures about how many customers we already have. So the red line shows you the capacity of the cooling customers we connected to our networks, or we provide with cooling. And so you see we started in 2006, and now we have about 180 190 megawatts of capacity at the customer side. And what is our goal we set ourselves in 2009, 2010 was to have 200 in 2020. We nearly reached it, so I think we can say we reached the goal that we set, the vision we set ourselves. So what do we need? We need a production site. That is where we can produce the cooling. We need a recooling. We do it either over the river, or we do it either with cooling with open cooling towers. The recooling is very important for the efficiency of the system. And what we are looking now is more and more is if we could use the heat from the recooling also for heating. There we see two concepts. One is that we try to use it locally on low temperature level. The other one is that we store it in geothermal drill holes and use it then in the winter for heating with heat pumps. That is something we are developing now. So the spread is not very high, but we see it as a very interesting perspective. For the using it on local level is the problem is always that we have a heat in the summer where the use of the heat is not so good as it is in the winter. So with what we need for district cooling, yes, we need pipes. We need pipes to provide the cooling to our customers, and sometimes it is tricky because we are not the only one using the streets and using the pavements. There is electricity, there is gas, there is district heating, there is telecommunication. So there are a lot of infrastructures using the streets, but till now we always found a way to connect our customers. And what we need is a cooling exchanger at the customer side. This is what then provides the cooling to the customer. And what the customer or we provide is the way how the cooling is then coming into the building, into the flat or the office. So this is in most times there are some kinds of fan coils or some kind of cooling registers or ceiling coolings, because most of the times district cooling is for office buildings and not for the flats. But we see that the development of cooling in flats is growing fast, very fast. So we look more and more into underfloor heating as also as use for cooling. To give you a short picture of the inner city of Vienna, we started there with one single project in 2012 in the middle of the heart of the inner city, which was no, sorry, my computer is making some, oh, so no, where we provided a very small district cooling network. And in 2013, we started with our big district cooling site, and where there we connected a lot of customers, and the network is growing. Now, this year we are building our third cooling station in on the other side of the inner city. I don't know if you see my cursor. It's on the right side. And there we will develop the district cooling network till to 2020, so that our vision is that we can connect and so that we can provide district cooling all over the inner city, because we have a connected network from all time. So what we saw, and not to forget that we work together with our city planning and with our city administration, and also not to forget that we also get for district cooling some subsidies. That is also a very important part, and that takes place with the point that district cooling has to be a business, and the subsidies help us that we can lower the investments, especially taking it down to absorption chillers, which are investment heavy, and so we can provide our customers to a fair price. So what were the key points? We designed our vision from the beginning, and we saw that district cooling is and has to be a business. The customer has to say, yes, I'd like to connect to district cooling. So you have to provide something to a viable price, and then the customer will connect. And the figures show that this is true. And to have this positive also political awareness, you always have to do something special. So if it is an absorption chiller, if it is a very efficient type of compression chillers that you're using, if you are using the waste heat for heating or something, you have to implement something very high efficient. Otherwise, you will not gain the positive awareness, and this is what makes district cooling then something special, and something what the city is proud of. And when the city is proud of, you get them to work with you together. And what we also learned is that there is not one concept. You always have to rethink, and you always have to rebuild your system because there are every customer is special, and you have to rethink if for this type of customer or for this customer there is not a better solution than you have already built somewhere else. So, for example, we are now looking in residential buildings, very intense, and there we see that we will more combine it with deep hole drillings to use very locally to provide a low temperature heating and and high temperature cooling with floor and space heating, and that in this case this is the better solution we see what we will build up in Vienna to combine it with district heating. Okay, thank you. That were the points I wanted to show you.
Thanks a lot, Aleksandar, for your introduction to what is going on in Vienna. It's very interesting, and we'll quickly move on to the next case, Aleksandar Ivancic from Aiguasol, who's been involved in the district cooling development in Barcelona for more than 2 decades. So, Aleksandar, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jakob. I'm very glad to share with you our experience. And good morning. First of all, good morning to everyone. Thanks to be here and to talk about this, I would say, exciting topic. I believe district cooling is one of the futures absolutely necessary for energy transition. I'm working with Aiguasol. Aiguasol is a consultancy and engineering company which is involved in different technologies, different solutions, but especially in district energy. In this sense, we are working with different United Nations agency, UNDP, UN Environmental Program, several development banks, and so on. In any case, our track record includes from, I would say, applied research till the implementation, which is value chain.
Question, Alex, can you share your presentation?
Oh, sorry. Just a second. I forgot to share it. Yeah. Is it better now?
Yeah, but maybe go into present. There you are. Yeah, excellent.
Okay,
Thanks.
okay. Sorry for that. Well, talking a bit about Barcelona, I mean, Barcelona is a very well-known place for urban renovation, urban planning strategies. Even we have a kind of model Barcelona in urban development, let's say, world. And yeah, it's, I would say, very vibrant and very innovative city. And without willing to make too much advertisement for Barcelona, I believe it's really a fantastic place to live and to work. And in this sense, I mean, Barcelona bet for smart strategies and for smart city trends. And in this sense, urban services are very, very important to attract, I mean, innovative businesses, to attract new economy and all this kind of stuff. So in this sense, I believe district energy in general, especially district cooling, is one of the key elements of these smart urban services. Well, for introduce this kind of new infrastructure, which is, as you for sure know, very heavy in size as well as in investment, you need to plan it. I mean, it's very, very important to make it in a way in coordination with all other players and stakeholders in the city. So in a way, planning is not just beneficial, but it's absolutely a must. So it's totally necessary. Let me share with you our track record in the city of Barcelona for last 20 years. I mean, I'm not going to read everything. You are going to have this slide. But what I would like to underline is that 20 years ago, district heating was almost unknown in Spain, and district cooling was totally unknown. I mean, it was completely new stuff there. So in that sense, I would say that in 20 years on the market where district energy was something completely puzzling, we achieved to have 4 systems in Barcelona region, and some of them quite nice and quite big. In this slide, you can also appreciate that there was a lot of municipality or public initiative in order to promote all these systems. But what we see is that the private side also responded very well. Actually, what we have now, it's around a bit more of 150 megawatt of cooling contracted by all 4 systems. The biggest one is Forum 22 District Lima. The second would be one which is growing in port and free zone, Ecoenergies, and besides that we have one in Valles and one in Mataró, which are smaller systems. Also a new area which are rising around the new railway station and mobility hub at Sagrera. It's in planning, and it's probably going to appear in some years. Okay, so what was the logic? And I'm talking about district heating and cooling. Probably for mature markets of heating, it's not the case, but in our case, heating and cooling go hand in hand. So they're always going together, because for our city, it's the way to promote district energy in general. So in first place, I would say that proactive local administration was totally the key element, the clue. Sorry. So the second point is that the project development was done always from very deep and detailed knowledge and understanding of local conditions, local context, which is in some projects, in some places, not always the case. You need really to understand what's happening, who is who are the stakeholders, your environment, and who can jump on board, who can support the project, and who is going to be competitor. In any case, we always start from opportunity, means a source, an interesting renewable or waste energy source. Then check the market, see what is the potential size, and identify some anchors. As in other district energy projects for cooling, the anchors are very important to be able to start the project. And from that point, we go for city planning at the same time with the preparation of system concept. I mean, technology, energy technology is at least the same as important as city planning. From that point, of course, we need to make a business case and then go for a procurement or for tender to find a private partner for a project. In any case, I would say that in all the projects which are operating now in Barcelona, we have some common threads. I mean, there is always public-private partnership. Private partner is always involved to the public tender, and then we have concessions of more or less 25 to 30 years. The share of capital is from private side 70 to 80%, and the rest 20 to 30 from the public side. So public authorities are always involved in the project and stay in the project after the start. The maximum price is regulated, usually indexed to the fossils and electricity, for cooling especially to electricity, for heating mainly to the fossil. And each system actually has an independent pricing system. We always has some anchor clients which helped us to start the project, to make this dead valley phase, which is always very difficult in so hard infrastructural projects. And urban transformation, which is kind of a trend in a lot of places. We need to renew our city, especially in Europe. So it's a kind of important driver, because you always have a very nice opportunity to introduce new infrastructure in these projects. And also in all the projects, there was some public pre-finance, means the risking of the project, some first investment, sometimes in sense of loans to the private partner. So if I should stress really some facts, I would say that policy and strategic planning was really very important, and especially policy and strategic planning, both in energy terms and in urban planning terms. And those two plannings going together is really something which reinforce very much the realization of this kind of projects. Then I would say leadership. I cannot imagine a successful initiative without proactive local administration and like a mayor or some politician who is really doing and promoting this kind of system and infrastructure, which is totally okay, because we are talking about climate change, we are talking about energy transition, and this infrastructure is very important in this sense. Okay, so finally, I would stress also public-private partnership, which is formed always around the project, in which is not only shared investment, but also coordinated planning and implementation between all the involved parties. And just for finalize my short presentation, if you want to get local authorities on board for district cooling project, and I would say it's really important to have them on board, because it's a key trigger for me. I think you need to help the authorities, or if possible to the city mayor, to answer the following questions. I mean, why this is good for my city? This is something which all the politicians are going to ask, especially the mayor. Then, if it's good, how can I get it? How my city can get this infrastructure? What are the environment? And then, who are the stakeholders? Who is playing in this game? Who can help? Who can be a partner? And who is going to be a competitor? And then finally, a mayor or politicians, they want to know how can they push to have this in their city. After that, when you have political leadership, then it's very important to involve the city planners, and then to identify and prove a robust business case, which is definitely very important. So as you see, I skip all the numbers, just one figure, 150 megawatts customers, because I think the technology, I mean, the technology is very important, but it's not the most important. It's not the single issue we need to treat, because we see around the globe a lot of projects where we are talking only about technology. But to make a successful district cooling project, you need to make it profitable, as my colleague said, and you need to involve all the city in order to receive this, as Aleksandar mentioned, very hard and very big in size infrastructure. And from that point, if you match all these components, then probably you're going to have a successful project. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Alex, for sharing the experiences from Barcelona. And now we have a few minutes left if there are any questions from the audience. I see that we have one question coming in regarding sustainable materials for piping solutions. And I know that generally it's a mix of steel pipes and HDPE pipes that are being used in district cooling systems around. I know that the industry is doing a lot to reuse the materials, both the steel, the foam, and the casing in that. So that's an ongoing work in the industry to ensure that the piping materials are sustainable and that they can be reused. I don't know if any of the speakers have anything to add on sustainable materials for piping.
Jacob, I would just add that durability is very important. I mean, besides sustainability, which is also very important. I mean, if the same piece lasts for 100 years, it's much better than if it lasts for 40 or 50. And manufacturers are also working very hard in enlarging the life cycle of the piping.
Yeah, very good point, Alex. If there's no questions, then I would like to ask a question for Aleksandar 1 and 2. How do you see the pull coming from the building owners for district cooling? Is that a major factor, or is it more about the utility or the city pushing district cooling?
May I comment?
Yeah, please go.
Okay, I mean the customer is actually the main point of all this story. I mean, without customers, there's no any kind of service, and definitely it's one of the probably more complex issue to assure the market and to assure your clients. In our experience in Spain, where, as I said, this is not a very known system, it was quite hard, but the awareness is rising and people is catching all the advantages of the system, because at the end of the day, in a tertiary premise, you have like a shopping mall or office building or whatever. All the spaces, being it on the rooftop of the building or in the basement, where you usually have cooling equipment, you have more free space. And in the center of the city, free space is the value is very, very high. So at the end of the day, the people is realizing that it's a very good solution, but it's not easy in the beginning.
Okay, thanks a lot, Alex. I think we'll jump to one of the questions that came in, and maybe we'll turn that to Vienna. The question is about fixed charges as part of the cooling charges, and how do you see the customer's perspective to fixed charges? How do you see that in Vienna, Aleksandar Ivancic?
I'm not sure if I understood the question.
Okay, I think the question is fixed charges compared to commodity or energy charges only. I guess you have a mix of fixed.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think compared to your own solution, it's like Aleksandar said, it's always the customer who has to decide if he takes or if he takes not, and so he has to compare what he can do on his own and what can he do with district cooling, and so his decision is also on taking one-time high investments or to connect to district cooling with fixed charges, with a fixed capacity fee. So the customer is looking on the perspective of if I take a one-time investment or if I take fixed charges for the capacity fee. So that was at the moment not really the problem in district cooling so far. And we are providing it with fixed charges because of the investments we have to take. And in my opinion, it is not fair for the customer then if we take investments into the fee for the working load, because that's not proper to how the costs are built up. So always when you have this kind of transferring investment prices into the working price, then you always have winners and losers. The ones who are not using very much working load, they would be the winners, even when they produce the same costs for the capacity, because capacity is very important and very expensive.
Okay, thank you for your input, Aleksandar. And let's just jump to another question. It's a question regarding the extent of renewables contributing to district cooling. And Chiara, I don't know, is that something you have input on from the IEA?
Yeah, thanks for the question. So of course, we would like to have renewables contributing to district cooling as much as possible where feasible, and to exploit all the excess heat and the free sources that we have. As is a very local problem, we don't really have estimates for this right now, but how we see it is as much as possible completely carbon-free market, so on-site renewables, or also the electricity that is used is coming from renewables. So the direction where we see it needs to go is to be a very low carbon system. And of course, the best mix of solution, how to do that, it depends very much on the location and the opportunities that we have in every areas. And also, as I mentioned in the publication, to exploit as much as possible the non-space cooling uses while producing space cooling. So for example, if there are opportunities to provide heat, or for example, in very warm countries for hot water, or also for other uses as desalinations, we think is something that can really improve the case for district cooling.
Okay, thank you very much. And I know that we're running a little bit on overtime here. I think we'll just continue for 5 more minutes if it's okay with everyone. We have a question from Mohammed Carter from Qatar Cool that asks about what sort of awareness campaigns that you are running for your customers and what kind of platforms you use for that. And I think that question goes to Barcelona or Vienna. Would either of you like to talk a little bit about that?
Well, awareness campaigns are, I would say not very extended in like a wide communication, because our clients are not residential. I mean, it's usually big office buildings or hospitals, theaters, whatever, tertiary buildings. So you usually work client by client, and especially in some areas of Barcelona, there is a kind of local rule which says that you should use the most efficient energy system you can design at your plot, at your site. So in that case, the comparison of district energy with other solutions is usually goes for district energy. So in a way, the people is encouraged to make their own small research and comparison, and to arrive to the conclusion that this is something good. And this is very working very good with the new clients, with the new buildings which are arising. But when you have to switch an existing building and to connect it to the district energy, you find usually the situation that the client actually does not know what is his cost of energy. I mean, not cost of gas, electricity, or let's say the supply itself, but all overall cost of cooling, for example, with maintenance, with shared just part of electricity which is going for cooling and not the rest of the building, a lot of other services and so on. So you usually have a fight in, let's say, or discussion about what's the cooling cost you are going to provide with your system, but what is let's say base case cost.
Okay, thanks a lot, Alex. Let's jump to Vienna. There's a specific question on what the share and the form of subsidies or grants for getting the district cooling system off the ground in Vienna. Alexander, can you share a little bit about that?
In Austria, we have a subsidy for heating and cooling, and this subsidy takes about 25 to 30% of the investments, also for cooling, with the point that you have to use at least 50% of the cooling with absorption chillers. So it is bound to use absorption chillers, then you are obliged to get the subsidy for the cooling, and then it takes about 25 to 30% of the investments.
Okay, thank you very much. And I think we'll just take one closing question and then round up. And then I think people can stay in the chat if they want, but just to stay a little bit within the time limit. Chiara, there's a question on the R&D side on what is needed to advance district cooling even more. What are the opinions of the IEA on what is the most crucial R&D piece for district cooling?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I think one of the key points is about this integration part. So really developing some both technologies and control systems and demand responsiveness measures that enable this integration to happen, to really exploit all the benefits that a technology as a district cooling can, I mean, a set of technologies as district cooling can provide. And on the second point, I think is related to all the technology-related measures that can improve the design of the technology themselves. So thinking, for example, of refrigerant controls or new compressors to work with low global warming potential refrigerants, I think is a priority, as well as the third point can be related to integrating storage and having both it on within the buildings and within the network itself can be something to look forward in the next years.
Okay, thank you very much. And just correcting myself a little bit, the Celsius Initiative saying that we can continue the discussion on the Celsius LinkedIn page because we need to close down. I just want to say thank you to all the speakers for contributing to this very interesting talk. And then I'll just give the word back to Emilia, if there's anything practical, but otherwise I'll just say thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, Jakob. Thank you to all the speakers. Nothing in particular, just kind of reminder, if you enjoyed this Celsius talk, next week we'll have a similar one on funding possibilities for cities, looking at the Innovation Fund, Horizon Europe, Smart Cities Mission, the Green Deal, and the EIP Marketplace Matchmaking Program. So I've put the link on the chat. The recording for this webinar will be uploaded to our website along with the presentations. Thank you very much to everybody.
Thanks, bye.